Good morning from Seattle. Good afternoon to the rest of the country. We're on day 6 of legal blogging, 45 chapters long. And it's beginning as part of the Blog for Good campaign that lawyers, bar associations, law firms, and LexBlog is a part of to showcase the insight, commentary, and information that lawyers are sharing regarding a myriad of legal issues arising out of the pandemic that we're facing as a nation. The topic today is blogging as a conversation. It's not blogging to broadcast information. And I kind of upped this in the table of contents from the post that you can see on the net, where I outlined the chapters one by one, because I think it's that much more important than some of the other concepts. And if you're going to blog, you have to think of it that way. You can't think of it as broadcasting. So think of it as blogging is a conversation. And I started blogging in 2003, and I was hearing that all over the place. Blogging is a conversation. It's a new means of communicating. And I really didn't have a clue what people were talking about. And once I started to maybe even get some glimpse in what they might be talking about, I was sure it did not apply to the legal profession. It maybe applied to media, maybe it applied to technology people, it just did not apply to legal. Then a couple things happened. One was I have gotten to know a gentleman by the name of Robert Scoble, really a fine person that was involved in really bringing the idea of engaging people and listening to the conversation out there on the net when he was at Microsoft. And so Microsoft was considered the evil empire at that point in time. But by getting literally 1,500 bloggers on all different types of blogs, it would scare the heck out of any law firm as far as all of them look different platforms, whatever, sharing what they were doing, and then going in and videoing people and asking them, who are you, what do you do? I mean, I just follow what he did in my own videoing. I started to pick up this idea of him talking about a conversation. Then he and Shel Israel came out with this seminal book on corporate blogging. And look at the title: Naked Conversations. Naked meaning people couldn't see them. They weren't in a coffee shop, that type of thing. So this book came out in 2006, so we're 14 years later. So what happens? We have this communication medium called a blog, and we go 14 years backwards. So it's like this was what was good in 2006, and we're moving forward, and everybody decided, well, not really. Let's use the net for something else that we think serves us in the way that we have always done marketing for the last 50 years. Let's go backwards. So instead of that point in time, let's go 14 years into the past. And, I think law firms have, by and large. I think they represented the internet, they represented blogging, they represented a communications medium, and what they did was they said, we're not going to use it, we're going backwards. We're going to dig in our heels and do what we always did, and we'll just put it on something called the internet that's just cheaper than having to put it on paper and brochures and send it out by the mail, or buying, smaller firms buying billboards or radio ads or TV. We've really bastardized this thing that is a great medium to just turn it into a marketing communications piece that we measure in false ways. So with blogging, think of it as a conversation, and conversation connotes communications. So if you go to the internet and look up, or go to Wikipedia and look up the internet, you're not going to see it. It is a device for broadcasting, for putting up websites, for marketing, for streaming TV shows, whatever. It was a communications medium. That's what you will see, a communications medium. And when you're thinking about communications, you're not thinking broadcast. So if I'm teaching blogging to a law firm and they want to begin to blog, there's different spectrums. On one side, there is the broadcast, shout out, don't listen. You frame the message. You're not necessarily caring what the message is of the people on the other side. Versus a conversation. You listen. You have empathy for what somebody is thinking. You're thinking about how they're going to respond. And ask them how they feel about each side, which makes them feel more comfortable. They're going to be on the conversation side. They're going to be on the communication side. They're not going to be on, you've got a bullhorn and you're screaming stuff at me. So that's what can make blogging so powerful. It can be on the communication. It can be on the conversation side. What do you do when you don't broadcast? You have a conversation. You listen. You listen first. You don't shout at. In a conversation, I suppose, and I may be the biggest violator of talking first before listening. But you should be listening. Who is on the other side? What is their pain? How can you help them? When you're in a lawyer, any conversation, you're listening to what the conversation is. Can you imagine picking up the phone as prospective clients on the phone and just start screaming? It's what we do. It's how we help people. You got a child custody issue, domestic abuse, all this type of stuff. No, you listen, or you would establish no trust. Well, the internet and blogging is no different. You listen. We might be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but if you're listening as a blogger, you've got different ways to listen today. A lot of people use, historically, a news aggregator. News aggregator today is something like Feedly. What does Feedly do? Well, it's like my radio. I can set the stations to bring me the information that it wants. What might that information be as a lawyer? Well, if I'm practicing a particular type of law, who are the most influential bloggers on the subject? Down to a very, niche. Maybe it's Mark writes in the art industry or something. It could be anything, in clothing industry. It could be whatever. Who are the influential bloggers? The influential publications. It might be a magazine, inside the law, outside the law. It could be words, because in addition to sources, which are blogs, magazines, news publications, or whatever, it could be words. It could be subjects. So I can listen to, things like pandemic and legal technology, and see what's written on that anywhere around the world. That's kind of interesting. If I want to be able to share information on that subject or to blog on that subject. I talked to a woman just a short while ago that has a very good family law practice here in Seattle. And we talked about the idea of, rather than letting publications know about certain types of issues, why don't you listen to those publications and reference what they're saying, so that then you're in the conversation with them and you can talk with them. And I explained, it could be on issues of, child visitation during the pandemic. Which is, it's shocking, that a judge can order somebody that somebody's got to get an airplane with a young child and fly a child halfway across the country during the pandemic at the same time while she's pregnant. Those are huge issues. And what is the conversation that could be taking place on that by virtue of listening? So when you're blogging then, and you've seen these sources and you've seen these subjects, what you want to be doing is referencing them, because that's the only way you're going to be heard in the conversation. You don't get heard by screaming and SEOing your site and paying people to take your content and distribute it around the internet. You get heard by talking about other people. And so if I reference a source, and it could be a New York Times reporter's piece, or it could be a local Seattle Times, or it could be a blogger's piece. And don't discount bloggers. They're some of the most important reporters in the world, because they have deep insight and passion and on niche issues. if I reference them and I say that, Patricia Smith has an interesting piece in the New York Times this morning about this, that or the other thing, and I take a block quote, I've cited her, I've cited the piece, I've taken a block quote, and I've gone and I went and said, she went on to say, this and that. By that second, I'm going to feel the urgency to say something. Just like clipping that New York Times article, putting it in an envelope for friends, I'm not going to just stick it in the envelope and say nothing. I'm going to say why I shared it with them. You do the same thing with a blog post. That's a conversation. And then what you're going to do is you're going to share the blog post on Twitter, and you give a little hat tip to Patricia Smith, and she's going to see it, and she's going to thank you. And you've just shaken the hands of somebody in New York City, whether you are in, Elko, Nevada, or Des Moines, or Seattle. Doesn't matter. You met somebody. That's great blogging, and that's a conversation. The concept when you think of I think of a room. So if blogging is a giant room, you get to shape that room by who's in that room. You decide who you have listened to, who you have seen coming through in that aggregator. They're in the room. All of those people are in the room. And this room is just your topics. So maybe I'm a workers' compensation lawyer that's just blogging on COVID-19 claims of healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, EMTs, other healthcare professionals at the hospital. I'm listening to people talking about that issue, whether it's in newspapers or blogs or what have you. I can add Twitter. I can follow certain people on Twitter that are mentioning, I can mention that. I might even do a search on something like that on Twitter and see what's coming up. Those are the people in the room. So you've assembled the room without those people even knowing they're in the room. But now you walk in the room, and now you're going to have a conversation. Your blog is going to be listening to what this one person said. And you now have, in effect, walked over here and told this person what she said. Interesting point she raised on what's going on for healthcare workers and workers' compensation claims in Trenton, New Jersey. And you're in Seattle. But you referenced it and shared what they said in a block quote, cited them, shared it with this person. Can you imagine how this person feels over here? It says, who is this person in Seattle, Washington that just shared something that I said? I mean, you can't avoid the urgency to walk across the room and see who they are. But it's a naked conversation. We can't see this. The rest of the world, I can explain this to a group of lawyers with 100 people. Nobody will even be able to get the concept after I explain it, let alone get involved in the idea. But this is what's going on every day all across the internet. It is the naked conversation that is taking place. And blogs are the deepest conversation because they're providing the most insight and commentary on it, and it leaves a memorial record back at your blog, like you're publishing a book or a journal. At one time, when the internet started, just parenthetically, it doesn't happen today, it really clicked, because what happened is as soon as I referenced her piece to this person by citing it, a trackback took place and went back to her blog and said, Kevin just cited you. Or she might have had what's called a vanity feeds folder on her news aggregator. It basically just says, somebody cited you. And you could put your name in. Like I put in Kevin O'Keefe, and the only person that was competing against me was a quarterback in Merrillville, Indiana. It was probably pretty good. So I would see things in the newspaper from Merrillville, Indiana, where he was playing a game. But other than that, I didn't see anybody else doing much on the internet that had the name Kevin O'Keefe, even though there's probably hundreds of thousands of Kevin O'Keefes. So what happened is every time somebody mentioned my name down here in a conversation, and I was standing up here, I heard it. And when I heard it, I looked them up. I Googled their name. I looked for them on LinkedIn. I looked to see if they used Twitter. And I'm intrigued. and I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the fact they slowed down enough rather than to shout, but maybe to share something that somebody else said. In my case, it was me. To show you the powerful impact of that, there were students at Michigan State University, and rather than teach the old way of doing things to build a name for yourself as a student with resumes and have people come in and meet employers, or here's how you set the table and use your fork here and this. And I was at a place where they actually taught students dinner etiquette, thinking that could lose a job if you didn't hold your fork the right way. But students at Michigan State started to reference what I was writing, and I saw it, and I was in my family room, and I was impressed. I was impressed that they were referencing it on Twitter. I was impressed that they were referencing it on blogging. And we literally struck up a conversation, I think, through Twitter and through blogging. And those students invited me to come back to Michigan State without talking to the faculty about it. I mean, the students did. And it was only a week before I was supposed to be back there that I got a call from Professor Dan Linna. He said, Kevin, I understand you're coming back. And I said, yeah, I understand that too. I really don't understand everything that's going on. I really appreciate you giving me a call. And then he put something together. But what those students did, by blogging and tweeting on something called Sparty Legal, one student did, who's got a phenomenal job at General Motors today on working with robotic cars. Or another woman that is over on the east side of Washington, doing great stuff. They entered the conversation. They entered the conversation by listening to what I was writing, and then engaging me, not by saying, "Hi, Kevin, you're a great guy," or "We follow your stuff." I mean, that nothing could be more shallow than that. But by referencing what I said and bringing it into what they were writing and what they were saying, they entered the room where they thought that they could learn from people that were out using the internet and what they thought were productive and powerful ways. When Robert Scoble was blogging, and he didn't use the reference Naked Conversations at that time, but what he did do was he said, there's so many people trying to reach me, and they were, because Robert was very influential, whether it was technology products and whatnot. And now it's visual reality and augmented. And Robert says, I can't hear you unless you talk about me. And when I first read the line, I think a lot of people would have said, well, that's very egotistical. But I didn't think it that way at all. What I realized was that was the naked conversation. If people would talk about what Robert was talking about, he could hear them. If he could hear them, he would look at who they are. If he could look at who they are and they were a person of substance, he might begin to follow them. He might begin to cite them. He might begin to reference what they had to say. And imagine how powerful that was to get cited on Scobalizer and be written about on Scobalizer so people would see you across the technology field. But it didn't happen because somebody said, do you know Scoble? Can you reach out to Scoble? I'm going to write Scoble with a press release. We got some communications people that are really smart, or I hired a smart communications person. They just entered the room. They entered the conversation that was taking place. Does it take some time to get used to this type of blogging? Yes, it totally does. It might take a year, but that's okay. I mean, if you learn how to use the internet as a communications medium, an engagement medium, and as a conversation versus a broadcast medium, and you start to get a comfort of it, that's okay. That's a huge step. I mean, if you're 40 years old and you learn that in a year, you're going to be using that for another 30 years. It takes some time. The easy way to do it or to think about it is to be a little bit of a clipping service. So everybody thinks that you have to blog to demonstrate your brilliance. And the problem is that, brilliance is kind of a commodity, especially among lawyers. I mean, there's great lawyers in particular niches that really know how to get it done. But a lot of people don't know how to really get it done. They are very smart. But to write a piece and say, okay, we need a piece that explains this, where here's the introduction, here's the analysis, here's the conclusion, and it's 1,000 or 1,500 words long. There could be a lot of pieces out on that subject. And then to say, okay, we shipped it off to Tom, Dick, and Harry's distribution service, and that these 15 people read it, I guess it's okay. And some of them may turn into clients, but you haven't entered into the room. You didn't get into the conversation. So why don't you look at it this way? You have a news aggregator, you use Feedly, and you see relevant information. And it doesn't take a lot of time. I have it on my iPad, and I could scroll through it in a few minutes and see what's of interest. I share it first on Twitter when I'm in a role, and I've been a little bit off my bearings the last year and a half. And then I take that information and I reference it and I blog it, and that's it. So what you're doing is a little bit of a clipping service, but there's nothing wrong with that, because as a lawyer, if you demonstrate to other people that you stay up to speed in a very open way, people start to believe that you're a good lawyer. You go search for a doctor, and the doctor is demonstrating that they're regularly monitoring certain medical literature, and they're sharing it with you, and they're sharing their insight and commentary on an ongoing basis. You will use them, because I'd rather have a doctor that's staying up to speed, that has particular passion in an area that I need medical assistance in, than somebody that I can't tell. And a lot of lawyers take all this information, and in the old days when it was paper, it stacked on our credenza and we threw it away. At Christmas time, we had to clear out the office. But nobody could tell that we were staying up to speed by Post-it notes on the side of information we brought back from CLEs. A blog is very, very transparent. It could be one thing a week. That'd be 52 things in a year. If you did it every other week, that would be 26 things in a year. If it's twice a month and you build up to doing it once a week, here's what I saw. Here's who brought it. Here's the block quote. Here's what they went on to say. Here's my take. That's a great blog post. And then to let the source know that you did it. So what are you? Maybe you are a clipping service. Maybe you are an aggregation source. When a couple people saw me after I blogged for a relatively short period of time, they said, I really like your blog. I was in Chicago at the ABA Tech Show. And I said, well, what do you like about my blog? I'm doing nothing but just trying to figure out what the heck blogging is because I don't understand it. And they said, no, you're sharing things that you're learning. You're actually as an aggregation source. But what was happening is that I was aggregating, and what they liked was the fact that I added a comment, and what was happening was that I was meeting people that I was citing. So I had no clue that I was already in the conversation by citing people. So think of a blog as a conversation. Think of how you listen first and the tools that you use to listen, how you shape that room, how you now engage in the conversation by referencing what other people are talking about. Think about how I'm going to let them know that I did mention them. And it can be as simple as, the interesting thing that you wrote, I shared it with my readers on my blog this morning, and keep up the good work. You can say that, New York Times reporters and Wall Street Journal reporters all want to be told that are doing a good job. So that's as easy as just letting people know about what is going on, and then start to feel how you're in the conversation. And at that point, you're building your network, you're building your influence. So that is it for today. The thing that I do want to remind you about is Blog for Good, and the Blog for Good campaign is law firms, associations, individual lawyers, LexBlog. LexBlog's empowering the blogging that is being done already and bringing more blogs on board. Example is New York City Bar Association just launched a publication that is aggregating and curating all the blog posts coming from New York City Bar members, and it's all about COVID right now. I mean, my God, it would be all around you if you were in New York. But look at how those lawyers in New York are rising to the occasion and sharing insight, commentary, and passion. About things, and you can have individual. Then their lawyers the bar is a benefit to those lawyers, giving the lawyers the benefit to blog for free on the LexBlog platform, on a mobile-ready, nice blog with all the support, basically the same blog that I use every day. And they'll have that free to the end of the year, and even after that, it's only going to cost them $39 a month to continue their blogging. We're telling them to do it on niches, covered niches that make it valuable to people. You'll be seen. You'll be part of a database for the New York City Bar and people looking for that information. And then individual lawyers can jump on board before their states. So, case of Washington, talking to a family law lawyer today, she's going to jump on board for COVID-19 issues relating to family law that are arising. She said getting lots of phone calls about things that would never come up before. So she'll beat the Washington Bar. And then every day, whether it could be the virtual factory, if that much, we're building the aggregation platforms state by state. So I think we had 6 built last week. We'll have 7 built this week. There's a map up that shows you all the states that we're covering and the states that are already on board. Illinois, Wisconsin, Arizona, Texas. States are becoming part of this giant family or giant community of people that are helping more and more people through Blog for Good, because there's no single place that is creating as much insight and commentary in the law that people need and making it freely accessible than lawyer blogs. And so what we want to do is showcase the lawyers that have that deep care, their expertise, their passion for helping people, and we want to work with associations that always are looking for ways to empower lawyers, to help lawyers, to make their association more relevant to lawyers by doing that. And thank God, I guess we have the technology to be able to help folks today. So stay tuned. I think this subject, this blogging is a conversation, is about as important as anything you can begin to appreciate. If you have questions, you can ping me at email, kevin@lexblog.com. You can go on Twitter and ask me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on everything. If you Google Kevin O'Keefe's cell phone, you'll find that too. You can call me. I would begin to learn what that is. I would begin to learn what a news aggregator is, what it means to blog in a way that I can share information and insight. You will find not only that your blog is more effective, but you'll find that your blogging is taking about half the time, a quarter of the time, and that you're getting more out of it, both personally, learning, and business development wise. Thanks much, and have a good day.